Access to Democracy is made possible by donations from the following organizations. Thomson Reuters, a global company with expertise and insight to unravel complex situations in the areas of law, tax, compliance, government, and media. Their worldwide network of journalists and editors keep customers up to speed on relevant global events. Thomson Reuters, the Answer Company. The division championship Minnesota Twins are looking to go all the way to the World Series in 2024. Bolstered by inspirational shortstop Carlos Correa, a healthy Brian Buxton, and rookie phenom Royce Lewis, plus a pitching staff led by Pablo Lopez and an outstanding bullpen featuring Johan Duran, the Twins are the best bargain in the major leagues, and Target Field is the best venue in baseball. Established in 2007, 45th Parallel Spirits was among the first 50 micro-distilleries in the United States. Based in New Richmond, Wisconsin, all aspects of production occur at our facility. If you're interested in visiting and learning more about the 45th Parallel Distillery, please check our website and plan a visit to tour our facility and taste our spirits. Truestone Financial, with locations in Minnesota and Wisconsin, has proudly served its members since 1939. Truestone engages, educates, and supports its members to ensure they have the tools to empower their financial well-being. Truestone Financial, your neighborhood credit union. Learn more at truestone.org.
Hello and welcome to Access to Democracy. I'm Bill Raker, your host for this edition of the program. Today we're very pleased to welcome as our guest to Access to Democracy, Mara Humphrey. Mara is the President CEO of the Minnesota Credit Union Network. Mara, we're delighted to have you as a guest with us today, and we're anxious to hear what you have to say about Minnesota's Credit Union Advantage, which is the topic of our today's discussion. So Mara, let's start with the basics. What is a credit union?
Well, first off, I want to thank you, Bill, for having me on, and a big thank you to the crew at Access for Democracy for making this possible. Excited to be here today to talk about the credit union advantage that credit unions across Minnesota offer. So credit unions are not-for-profit financial cooperatives, really designed to serve their members. Community-owned, member-based.
Well, tell us a little bit how they distinguish themselves from banks, which are also consumer-oriented financial institutions.
That's a great question, Bill. Credit unions offer many of the same services and products that banks offer. The biggest difference is their structure and their mission. Because credit unions are member-owned, you're an owner in your credit union and have a say in how your credit union is owned and operated. The board of directors is elected by the members, so you have a choice in how your credit union is run, as well as credit unions are really designed to give back to their communities.
Well, those are some interesting and significant distinguishing points between banks and credit unions. So let's develop this a little bit further. How are credit unions chartered, organized, and regulated?
That's a great question. Credit unions, very similar to banks, are both state and federally chartered. They're regulated by both the state, Minnesota Department of Commerce, and the National Credit Union Administration. Both charters are very highly regulated. Your money is safe, sound, and secure in a Minnesota credit union. Every credit union also offers insurance, similar to FDIC, for all your accounts.
So let's look at this a little bit more. If a credit union is state chartered, then the charter is issued by the Department of Commerce here in Minnesota, and it's the Department of Commerce that regulates that state charter credit union. If the credit union has a federal charter, then that charter is granted by the National Credit Union Administration, NCUA, and it's regulated by that federal agency as well. And by regulation, what does that mean?
So regulation of credit unions is all over the board. Our federal and state regulators come in and they make sure that we're complying with consumer lending laws, that we are offering fair services and products, and they also examine for safety and soundness and management of the credit union to ensure that your deposits are properly being taken care of within your credit union.
So that supports the safety and soundness of the operation of the credit union then.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The examinations really make sure that credit unions are safe and sound, being well managed, that your money is being taken care of within the credit union, as well as they do a number of examinations, just really making sure that credit unions are complying with consumer lending laws.
So there are lots of other laws and regulations put out by the SEC, maybe the FDIC, and other governmental agencies that credit unions are compelled to abide by, just like banks are.
That is correct.
Yeah.
We have very similar requirements that we're required to follow. I'd say the biggest regulatory agency that has now stepped in is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
The CFPB.
Yep, and they regulate the consumer safety and soundness side.
Of banks and credit unions.
Of banks and credit unions, correct.
Good. So you talked about the credit union members' deposits or savings in the credit union being insured. That's insured by the National Credit Union Share Insurance Fund?
That is correct.
Which is different than the banks that are insured by FDIC.
That is correct. Credit unions have their own share insurance fund, but very similar in terms of insurance coverage for your deposits at a credit union.
The limits of coverage are the same, whether it's
that is correct.
FDIC in a bank or the share insurance
Yep.
fund in credit unions. Okay, good. So, Mara, can you tell us a little bit about the history of credit unions in general, and maybe here in Minnesota? When did this whole idea get started?
Well, the idea has been around for a very long time, Bill. Finally, credit unions started early 1900s were the first ones here in the United States that started up. The first one in Minnesota started in 1925, and then we saw a real big proliferation of credit unions during the Great Depression. A number of them started and continued to ramp up, and really it was an effort of employer groups, employees, friends, churches, who really wanted to pull together their dollars to help support each other, and starting a credit union was the best way for them to do that.
And so over the years, there have been thousands of credit unions organized. But today, do you have some statistics about the number of credit unions operating here in Minnesota and the number operating nationally?
Sure, Bill. So in Minnesota, we currently have 86 credit unions here in Minnesota. That represents 2.2 million Minnesota credit union members, as well as over 400 locations here in Minnesota. Nationally, we're about 4,800 credit unions across the United States.
And like for many organizations, there's been consolidation and mergers among credit unions, so that the number of credit unions may be declining, but the number of credit union members and the assets deposited in credit unions continue to grow. Do you have some statistics on what those deposit numbers are, the asset numbers are, and memberships here in Minnesota?
Absolutely. We're up to $39 billion in assets here in Minnesota for Minnesota credit unions. Minnesota credit unions continue to add locations, which has been really exciting to see that access and the advantage that that provides to Minnesota consumers across the state. There are over, as we're looking at kind of the nationally, looking at the consolidation, we have seen that consolidation. That started in the 1960s here in Minnesota. We reached a high of about 480 credit unions, and then it continued to decrease. But on the converse side, we've seen Minnesota credit unions continue to grow, both members, locations. Credit union assets here in Minnesota have tripled over the past 15 years.
Tell us about some of the services that members can get from credit unions.
Credit union members can get all the services that they might expect at a bank, but many more. Credit unions provide individualized member services really tailored at helping serve their members with their needs. And that's really one of the fun pieces about my job is we have 86 credit unions here in Minnesota, and they all operate slightly differently and offer different services to their members based on who that membership is and what their board of directors is looking for to provide back to the members.
So in a credit union, typically as a member, I can get a checking account, I can get a regular savings account, I can get certificates of deposits, I can get mortgages, I can get a commercial loan. I mean, the credit unions serve not just individuals, but they serve organizations and companies and businesses as well, don't they?
That is correct. Credit unions not only serve individuals across Minnesota, but also businesses across Minnesota. And credit unions offer all the traditional loans, checking accounts, savings accounts, but also offer several other products. One product that we're really excited to be launching this year in Minnesota is offering Medicare services to credit union members. We did a pilot over the past year offering Medicare, and average savings for a credit union member was $1,400 per year.
Wow, that's impressive. So this is an opportunity for a credit union member to get Medicare related insurance through the auspices of being a credit union member.
Correct.
Is that right? Yeah.
Correct.
Okay, and are there certain insurance companies then that write those coverages for the members?
We partner with all 6 of the key insurance agencies here in Minnesota to make sure that we are getting members the best deal for them as they're looking at Medicare insurance. And I think that's just another example of how credit unions are continuing to find new and creative ways to help assist their members in their lifelong financial journey. We get a credit union member and don't view it as a one-time transaction, but this is a lifetime of serving those members throughout all your life stages, whether it's starting out and going to college, getting your first car, buying your first home, going into retirement and looking to Medicare and looking at estate planning. So trying to make sure that we're helping serve credit union members throughout all those life stages.
And so it's once a member, always a member if you keep your account open in the credit union. Yeah, great. You know, maybe a little bit more about credit union membership. You talked about that and you talked about ownership. Credit unions in general just don't serve the public. A person can't just walk into a credit union and say, I want to open up an account or a membership. Tell us how membership in a credit union is determined. How does that work? How does eligibility for credit union membership work?
I like to say that not everyone can join every credit union, but hopefully every Minnesotan can join a credit union. Credit unions are really designed around the philosophy of membership, which means traditionally, it was a live, work, worship, live area. Every credit union is really their board of directors that's elected by the members decides what that field of membership is. So within that, they really look at which group of members can they best serve, and then taking their next step as their board of directors is how can they best serve that population of members.
That's helpful to understand. Mara, when I introduced you, I said that Mara Humphrey, the President CEO of the Minnesota Credit Union Network, is our guest today. But we didn't talk about what the Minnesota Credit Union Network is. So would you tell us what the Minnesota Credit Union Network is and what your role there is as President, CEO of the organization?
The Minnesota Credit Union Network is a statewide trade organization for Minnesota credit unions. We're the strongest advocate for Minnesota credit unions, and really our job is to champion for them. We do that in several ways. One of them is really that public awareness, being the voice for Minnesota credit unions, whether it's talking about the amazing advantages that credit unions across the state provide to members, whether it's working and advocating for our credit unions across the state and their members on policies, legislation, regulations that help us best serve members. We also provide education, professional development, compliance support, and a whole suite of products and services that we can provide to credit unions to help them serve their members better.
So how is this trade association governed?
So we're lucky, very similar to a credit union. We're governed by a board of directors, and very diverse board of directors from across Minnesota, as well as varying credit union sizes.
So the directors are elected by the member credit unions who belong to the trade association.
Absolutely, very similar to a credit union in that regard.
So you talked about the state trade association for credit unions. There is a national association for credit unions as well. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, what they do?
So America's Credit Unions is the national trade organization for credit unions across the country, and we work very closely with them, amplifying the message on a national level, providing additional education and resources, and providing additional tools for credit unions across the country. It's also a great networking opportunity to meet and learn from other credit unions from across the country.
So you mentioned that one of the services that the network here in Minnesota provides, as well as the National Trade Association, is advocating on behalf of credit unions and credit union members. Now, I know you recently became the president, CEO of the Trade Association here in Minnesota, but you worked at the Trade Association for a number of years as the lead or chief advocacy officer there, so I know you have experience in advocating. Tell us what credit unions advocate for and how do they do it?
Well, I could say credit unions advocate for credit unions and their members, but really making sure that we can provide best financial services that we can for members. In this past Minnesota legislative session, we were proud to support legislation that would require financial literacy in high school education, and feel that that is an important skill that we want to help support, and we're really excited to jump in and partner with school districts across the state to provide that financial literacy education as part of high school curriculum. We also advocate just to make sure on a number of different issues, whether it's making sure that there's not predatory lending happening. Also want to make sure that credit unions are still alive and well and doing well here in Minnesota and able to continue to support their members and grow.
And that's a big job, and it's really important. I know that when you advocate for legislation and for policies, you're working with the legislators, you're working with the regulators, monitoring the kinds of laws that are being introduced or considered and the kinds of regulations, and assessing the impact, whether it's positive or negative, for credit unions as an organization or for individual credit union members. So that's a big job.
It absolutely is.
So what do you think is going to, while we're on that subject, let's talk about the new legislative session coming up here in Minnesota next month. What's going to be on your radar for credit unions? Do you have an idea yet?
So keeping an eye on a number of things. As I mentioned, the financial literacy mandate, really hoping to go back and put some additional details in there to help guide curriculum as that is being rolled out. I have the feeling a number of things will be revisited a little bit. I will add as a side note, just as we're looking at all the changes that came through from last session, we're still working on implementing a number of them, and I think the legislature is going to go back and tweak some of them as well. So hoping it'll be a very productive session, probably a little shorter than the 2023 session was.
I'll digress just a little bit here. When you were the chief advocating officer, do you have any kind of interesting or memorable experiences that you had while you were doing that work for the Credit Union Network?
I have a lot of very interesting, memorable experiences. Honestly, it's an honor to be able to represent Minnesota credit unions and being able to tell their stories. I think that is the most impactful thing that gets across when I'm talking with legislators, but also just personally, is those individual stories of being able to help individual members and individual consumers. One piece of legislation that I'm very proud of that we were able to pass was on the federal level, partnered with Minnesota delegation, Congressman Emmer and Senator Tina Smith, and we're able to work with them to pass bipartisan legislation in D.C. a couple years ago to help protect credit union members. And in the environment where it's very tough to get anything done, that was very rewarding.
So one of the instruments I think that the network uses in advocacy is a program called GREAT, G-R-E-A-T. Can you tell us what that program is and how it works?
Absolutely. The GREAT program was set up to really help give credit union members a voice. As we're looking at legislation that's going to impact credit union members, it gives them the opportunity to weigh in on that. We keep them updated in terms of what's going on, what could potentially impact them as a credit union member, and ultimately impact their finances. So great tool, keep you updated. We'll send alerts if there's something that we really need our GREAT members, our credit union members to know about across Minnesota.
So it's an opportunity for individual credit union members to advocate or to lobby on behalf of credit unions and their members, isn't it?
It absolutely is. It allows them to weigh in with their legislators, their lawmakers, on what's important as a credit union member. One of the fun things about working for credit unions is credit union members really do love their credit union. They realize all the advantages that they are getting because they are a credit union member, and they want to be able to help maintain that and support that continuing into the future.
And credit unions support their communities and give back to their communities. And one way they do that is through the Credit Union Foundation, the Minnesota Credit Union Foundation. Tell us a little bit about what that is and what they do.
So the Minnesota Credit Union Foundation, it's our not-for-profit charitable arm of our organization, and it's designed to help both credit unions and communities thrive and grow. We support different efforts, including making sure professional development, community grants, helping make sure that we can help support communities within that. We have two different committees under that. One of them is Credit Unions for Kids, which is a national effort, but here in Minnesota, we raise dollars for Gillette Children's Hospital to help support that. As well, underneath the foundation arm, we have a Foundation Scholarship Council, which raises dollars within the industry to help give college scholarships to credit union members.
Well, you mentioned Credit Unions for Kids. I know that's been an ongoing project of the foundation for a number of years. Do you recall how many years this has been one of the major activities or organizations that they sponsor, and how much money the Minnesota members and credit unions have given to that part of the foundation?
This is one of the really fun parts of my job, Bill, is being able to help support Gillette Children's Hospital and the kids there. Credit Unions for Kids has been here in Minnesota raising dollars since 1996, and they've raised over $3 million to help contribute and help support.
That's impressive.
Absolutely. And it's a great cause.
Yeah. So you mentioned earlier that there's like maybe over 5,000 credit union employees here in Minnesota. What are some of the career opportunities open in credit unions for people who might want to pursue a line of work in the financial services industry?
That's a great question. I think everyone assumes that you need to be an accountant to work at a credit union, and obviously there are careers in credit unions with accounting backgrounds, but there's a whole wide area of different career paths that people find within the credit union industry. We have marketers, we have IT, we have human resources, all across the board. And so I encourage anyone who's considering looking for a job, don't limit yourself. There's a wide variety of backgrounds of individuals who work in credit unions across the state, and you can check out on our website, we do have a job board for open jobs here in Minnesota.
Well, that's good for our viewers to know. Thank you for sharing that information with us. So, Mara, in your job, in your role, in your perspective, what are some of the challenges that you think credit unions are going to need to meet in the future as technology changes, regulations and laws change? What are those challenges going to look like? Do you have a perspective on that?
So looking into the future, one of the challenges is really balancing being high tech and also being high touch. As we're transitioning, I talked about the origination of credit unions here in Minnesota, and the majority of credit unions that started up back in the 1920s, 30s, 40s, the story is 5 people sitting around and pulling their dollars together to help support each other and their community. Right now, as we're looking at that, we still want to remain committed to our members and delivering that same customer service, but we also need to deliver, we know that we need to deliver that high tech, high touch piece on a phone, on mobile. And how do we maintain that balance of member service, looking out for members, but then also providing robust technology that fits the changing demographics? And if I may, I'll just share a quick story. Mm-hmm. My oldest is home from college, a senior in college. Sent them to go pick up pizzas for us at a place that doesn't take cards. Sent them with a check and realized they had never written a check. So it's really credit unions looking at how do we evolve and making sure not only are we providing the high tech solutions that consumers are looking for, but also still serving our members.
And it's important to understand that credit unions are just as current on the use of high technology as any other financial institution would be.
Oh, absolutely.
So they're always looking out for the safety and security and privacy of the member's relationship with them. So, Mara, as we wrap up the last couple of minutes on our program today, and you've been a very interesting guest sharing so much fascinating information with us, what kind of message, if there is one, that you'd like to leave with our viewers as we conclude the program?
I would encourage every viewer to check out a credit union. If you're not a credit union member, go to our website, look for a credit union. There are so many advantages to being a credit union member here in Minnesota that I encourage you to join us and join the movement.
Yeah, and because it's called a credit union, doesn't mean that it's just credit or that it has anything to do with a labor union. It's just the terminology used for a financial cooperative, as you've explained to us, that people with a common goal, a common need, set out to help one another through this cooperative effort that has evolved into a significant part of the financial services industry of the United States.
Absolutely. Anyone can join. Hopefully there's a credit union for you. Encourage you to look. Check out the advantages for yourself. Mm-hmm. This is a cooperative movement. It's not a credit or a union, but I think the name is a little bit of a misnomer, but it's what credit unions stand for. It's the cooperative model.
Well, let's note that there are credit unions all over the world.
There are.
Thousands of them in over 120 countries. So it's a worldwide kind of movement, a worldwide kind of organization. And credit unions, as we like to point out, because I used to be in the credit union industry, credit unions are for people, not for profit. So our guest has been Mara Humphrey, the President CEO of the Minnesota Credit Union Network. Mara, thank you so much for being with us today. Congratulations on your new role as the leader of the Trade Association of Credit Unions here in Minnesota, and good luck to you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thanks. Great.